I'm Anna Marie Cox, and never tell me the odds.
Hi, I'm Daniel Dresner, and of course I've looked better.
Welcome to Space the Nation, where we look at science fiction through the lens of
Asymmetric Empire.
And syncretism. I believe I said that correctly.
Yes.
Today we are going to talk about The Empire Strikes Back, available at Disney Plus and nowhere else, Dan. Not really available anywhere else.
I mean, if you still have like basic cable, I'm sure it runs there every once in a while. You know, I'm pretty sure TNT does it. Yeah.
In the next few weeks, we will examine Hiram Inz's novel Leech. And then in our schedule, we have Scalzi book ? So maybe a Scalzi book. I think that we should probably do Old Man's War. Or okay. Red Shirts. Old Man's War, that's his, right? That's his. Yeah, it is.
I believe Old Man's War, yes.
Starter Villain, which has talking cats.
Oh, it just came out, correct? I mean,
yeah.
Or like, we might need to do that.
Okay. All right. And maybe we'll let the Discord weigh in, which actually brings me to something, Dan, when we talk about the Discord weighing in.
That's right. You know what? We've hit 250 total patrons. And so I believe we have to do a special, patron-only episode about a topic chosen by the patrons. Anna, I think you're a little more on top of this than I am. How far along are the patrons in terms of choosing this?
Not very far along. So the connection between the Discord and having patrons is that you have to be a patron to be on the Discord. So that is where they're hashing out what we're going to do. And Dan, I think it's safe to say that they are, doing a really good job of proving why these kinds of message boards are called Discords.
Okay. Fair enough. I mean, maybe we need to intervene just a little bit. We might need to intervene. We can do some nudging, perhaps. Like that might be the best way to.
That's right. I have been trying to just put down my imprimatur on Michael Clayton as being the thing for us to discuss, but I don't think anyone else has volunteered that. So maybe we should just do that at some point.
Maybe we just do that as a surprise episode. Yeah, I did read the Discord where they clearly seem to think that we're just going to somehow manage to do it anyway. We really are going to listen to the patrons on this.
Really, there is an idea that they might do a bracket-style elimination.
I think that's actually a really good way of doing it. I think that's the best way.
And it'll mean that we don't have to do the patron-only episode until like December. So
totally fine. We're good with that. Next month's going to be a little intense for me, so I'm okay with this.
Let them take their time. Yep. That's totally cool. We are excited for it. One thing that is amusing to me is that although we have explicitly said, basically, we don't really, I think this would maybe the explicit time we're saying it. We don't want to do science fiction necessarily, right? Like this would be a fun time to do something that's not science fiction.
Yeah, I want is a strong word. Like
really,
they really want us. Yeah, they're. Well, there's a reason they're patrons of this podcast,
true.
Anna.
That's
so
true.
like
they could be listening to the Flophouse or something if they really, or Blank Check, one of the many other movie podcasts.
How did this get made? Yes, no. Credit to them if they want us to do sci-fi. We said we would do anything except a 9-hour movie about the Holocaust, video games, or an entire television series.
Yes. One thing that the patrons have recommended that I think would be interesting for us to do, and it's not in the category of something we disallowed, is an audiobook.
Oh.
There is the William Gibson penned script for one of the Alien sequels was produced by Audible as just a radio play type thing.
Ooh. William Gibson? Oh, okay. All right. I'm feeling that vibe. That I could do. Yes.
And maybe we could do that even if they don't recommend it.
Even if that doesn't make the final list. Like we've been talking about potentially doing an audio project. I think for Fishmas, that might be on the list, I believe. Correct?
For Fishmas, which if people have not been following, we're going to do a Lawrence Fishburne month, which, Daniel does celebrate Fishmas.
Yes, it's true.
Not Christmas,
That's true.
But Fishmas.
No, I do celebrate
So
Fishmas.
we've discussed being a patron and being on Discord. There's other things that you get if you become a patron for as little as $5 a month. You get early access to episodes. You get videos of these recordings, which include some of the outakey things because I'm the one who edits the video.
Wait, this makes me feel much less safe now.
I mean, I try to take out the stuff that's like really like, oh, we like waited 5 minutes for Exley to stop barking and that kind of thing. Yeah. But it's a little rougher, just a little rougher around the edges. So that might be fun for people. You get our AUAs. There's merch in our future.
There
Not
is.
just a joke about late capitalism merch, but
Mhm.
actual physical stuff.
You know what else? You can listen to our podcast without advertisements.
That's right. If you aren't a patron, you know you're not a patron, because right before this started, our talking started, you heard some ads.
You did.
There's going to be some ads in the middle and some ads at the end. Those ads are punishment for people who wash the dishes while listening to podcasts. That is what those are there for. Don't wash dishes and listen to podcasts.
I'm not sure I follow this one, but okay,
Your
Anna.
hands are wet.
What?
You can't. Your hands are wet. You can't get to your.
Okay. Okay.
You can't get to your phone because your hands are wet, so you can't fast forward fast enough.
I don't know where
Dan.
I don't know where you get your ideas, lazy.
Keep up with me. Keep up. All right, Dan, I haven't asked you how you're doing in a while. You want a quick check-in from the Boston headquarters?
The Boston headquarters is doing okay. I'm not going to lie. January was a pretty stressful month for a variety of reasons. It's now February, and it's a different kind of stress. I've got 4 trips this month. So a lot of traveling. Yeah, a lot of traveling this month, starting the day after we record this. But that said, the really heavy lifting of the writing stuff for the traveling is almost done, and that fills me with a great deal of relief. How about you?
Well, Exley's no longer sick. That was like my January crisis.
Mm-hmm.
The book is getting written.
Whoa! No! Don't say the book is getting
right.
Don't say the book is getting written like it's a passive thing. But come on.
And also, I was working on it for a year. What is happening now is I am like having words together and paragraphs in an order that I could give to an editor.
Right.
Rather than just like, here's some things.
These are words. They are words that are connected in some way. See what you can do with them.
Yeah. Here, just like tossing a bunch of index cards in the air.
I used Mad Libs for this chapter.
It's very, 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 it's still very formless, but it's starting to have something of a form.
That's good.
That's really exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah, it is. And it's funny though, because one of the things that occurred to me, and maybe this will be useful to some would-be writers out there, which is, I was fortunate enough to get a contract to write this. And so for like a year, I thought of the book project as like, oh, I have to write this because I'm getting paid for it. Right?
Yeah.
And it took going through a lot of shit for me to get to a point where I was like, oh no, I have to write this. Like I have to write this because for me.
Yeah.
Like it is part of my evolution as a human, like part of becoming a better person and more in tune with the person I believe I was put on this earth to be. And also I got paid for it. But I don't know, like you can probably understand, like there's a difference between feeling like you have to write something because someone told you to, and like, oh no, I need to write this.
Yeah, as you well know, there are 2 imperatives as a writer. The first is, someone's paying you, which is, by the way, a super good reason to write something, like,
Totally,
generally.
and there are things I've written because someone's paying me.
Exactly. Perfectly good. But the kind of writing that you have to do because it is an internal compulsion is often... Let me put it this way, you're right. There is a wonderful emotional release when you actually are able to write that.
And it's also harder for me.
Yeah, and that's how I feel with sometimes my books, where it's like it's a long, slow wind up, and then, all I do is I hope you get to the point where you're just writing like 15 hours a day because you're actually in the zone.
So too. And if you're listening to this, already happening. Happening. Good, yeah. Totally gonna be all there on time for sure. Anyway, coming in 2026 from Random House.
Yes.
Dan, we're talking about Empire Strikes Back.
Yes, we are.
Why? What possessed you to like pick out this little obscure gem?
I know. So one obvious reason is, why the hell not? It's a great goddamn movie, which we're going to talk about. But more specifically, this is a combination of cold sci-fi winter and cannon fodder, right? I mean, it definitely starts in the cold, the whole sequence on Hoth. We're absolutely doing it because it's a cannon fodder episode.
We haven't done a cannon fodder in a bit.
I haven't done cannon fodder. Plus, I recall when we were discussing Rebel Moon and we asked for questions from the Discord, there were some murmurs on the Discord suggesting maybe Star Wars was overrated. That because, after all, Zack Snyder was trying to copy Star Wars, is it the case that our, like, elevation of Star Wars, the original trilogy at least, to the canon, misplaced? That it's just because it was, what we remember
so
when we
formative.
were young. Yes, exactly. So it seems worthy to test that by discussing the film widely considered to be the best of the original trilogy and the best of all of the films, frankly.
I think upon rewatch, I think it's the best of all of them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. I would say, but spoiler alert, we both love this film. It's like,
It's been years.
Yeah.
And I don't remember the last time I saw it. And I think I was kind of prepared to be like, I know this. I've seen it 1,000 times. Like, I was the kid who went and saw the movies multiple times in theaters. Mm-hmm. And then when they came out on VHS, multiple times on VHS. And then, like, my entire, like, up until probably my 20s, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I was watching this movie regularly. So when I sat down to watch it for us, I was like, I'm going to get my crossword, or, like, I'm going to, like, have, something else going on.
You don't need to pay close attention to the plot for this film. You know what the plot of this film is.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, well, there. I'm like 100% there. Like, and we'll get to the specifics. Part of it is the acting is just choice throughout. Mm-hmm. The script is a lot. I mean, they're flawed, but, like, it's tight. It's real tight.
Well, also, especially compared to most of the other Star Wars films, this is actually a good script. It's not perfect, obviously, but it is a legitimately good script, acted by good actors.
Okay, segue to, will this podcast ruin it for you? Impossible to ruin?
Look, the way I think about this, Anna, there are you have to acknowledge there are probably people who have never seen these films.
Oh, God.
Okay. I know that sounds crazy. Or maybe there are people who think they've seen these films, but they've only seen, like, the good parts on YouTube or something like that. The point is, watch the whole goddamn film first, okay?
There is a spoiler.
It is possibly the most significant spoiler in film history, okay?
Like, it's the original no spoilers.
Yes, it's very possible this was the birth of no spoilers. In fact, I remember, Anna, not for this film, but I remember, so our previous experience, which we sort of talked about, you saw it in the theaters multiple times. I saw it in the theaters multiple times. What I remember was when Return of the Jedi came out, I remember not being able to see it immediately. And I was at, like, in high school or something, and someone had seen it on, over that weekend and was telling the plot to everyone else. And I, like, literally was sticking fingers. I know, I was sticking my fingers in my ears and going, la, la, la. I did not want to know what the plot of this film was before I went in to watch it. And,
there's a whole genre of YouTube shorts of people filming their kids seeing the big reveal.
Oh, really? Yes.
And it's pretty fucking adorable. Like, I don't like kids, but I like seeing kids hear.
Like, what? Yes.
And it was that moment, right?
Yeah. Like, it's a shock. It is a legit shocking moment.
I'm trying to think, like, what movie had a twist with that emotional resonance in my lifetime. Like, there are great twists, like Usual Suspects, right. Sixth Sense. Mm-hmm. Like, there are good twists, but, like, the twist of, like, your heart being, like, ripped out of your chest,
The Sixth Sense might actually come close, actually, because, I mean, if you don't know,
there's a lot of pathos there.
It's a lot of pathos to that. It's a different thing. No. And this is part of a 3-film arc. So, like, it's not just the plot twist. It's also, like, you got to wait till the next film to figure out how to, what's going on. So,
what the resolution of it is, too.
Yeah.
All right. I already went to previous experience, a formative event of my life.
The one thing I would say, like, it's worth noting, you talked about watching it on VHS. I still have the original VHS because I remember they released the VHSs before the special editions came out in the late 90s, which was the first time of many times that Lucas fucked around with the origin. So I still have that. The other thing I remember about this, by the way, and this I think was where the Star Wars films were unique. Most films when we were growing up, as cable emerges, like HBO and all of those, it was understood that films would be available for rental on VHS, and then they would go to cable. Mm-hmm. I remember the original trilogy did not go to cable for something like 15 years. Like, it took a long ass time for that to happen. And so it weirdly gave these films, I think, an extra cachet because you didn't watch them all that often.
They knew people would buy them. That's what happened. Like, they were like, we don't need to, we know people will fucking buy this.
Yes.
And so, and people did.
And people did. They were not wrong about that. That's fair. Yes.
And, it's been a long time since I remembered to include an IP as a flat circle segment. And I'm just going to say, like, this is the original IP's A Flat Circle.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, in some ways, like, we're going to talk about how great this film is. There is a way in which, as great as this film is, one of its legacies is a lot of IP being a flat circle. In other words, this is the film that justifies what a lot of people wound up doing later. And let's be honest, it works for Empire, it works for the original trilogy, doesn't always work for everything.
And it also, is one of the franchises that invented the expanded universe.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you and I have talked about this before, but in case people haven't heard that particular discussion, you and I belong to a Gen X fandom of this and Star Trek, where you're more familiar with the Star Trek expanded universe, right?
I believe
so.
Yeah.
I am like, for both of those franchises, I'm like, movies are enough for, movie, right. TV show. Like, I don't know, I don't want to watch all the cartoons and read all the books. And that's what I have my YouTube channels for now.
There you go. And I will say this, growing up, this also might have been the first time, and I think I wrote about this in a column for the Post, this film might have been the first time I got a little bit cynical about films. And the reason is that, as great as it was, do you recall this? I mean, we're getting to the story behind the story a little bit. The build-up behind Boba Fett, when this film was being released, I mean, they were marketing the shit out of Boba Fett as, we're going to introduce this new character. This new character is awesome. Boba Fett, and Boba Fett looks...
cool outfit.
It's a cool outfit. But I remember thinking, okay, we're going to the movie. I'm going to see this big deal about Boba Fett. Boba Fett had 4 goddamn lines in this film. Yeah. All right? Boba Fett was a marginal player. And I remember, as much as I love the film, I remember something nagging at me as I was walking out thinking, Boba Fett wasn't that big of a deal. What were they? Oh, that was marketing. And like, that was, an important moment for me.
Yeah. And of course, like, I remember I had the action figures and stuff.
Of course.
And of course, Gen X wouldn't have to worry about retirement if we'd all kept our Star Wars action figures.
No, I remember. In fact, I remember
that was supposed to be our pension plan.
Yes.
Like, our parents didn't realize it. They were buying us stocks.
Yep. Like, now, rewatching this, like, we see the snowtroopers going into the Hoth. I was like, oh yeah, because they're different uniforms, which meant you could buy the different action figures.
Same thought, but also I had all that stuff. Like, I had all this stuff. Like, in retrospect, again, like, completely valuable.
Yep.
But that I just like threw around too.
That we, as kids, played with like toys, as we were supposed to. I don't apologize for that.
If only we put them in vaults, then I would have a retirement plan. Speaking of plans,
yes,
Dan,
we should get to the story behind the story. And I was going to ask you how this little art house project got made, but in some ways we're treading on perhaps the most well-trodden ground in the history of sci-fi, correct?
Yeah, there are books and books and books and books. There are movies and movies and movies. There is a Wikipedia, which is Wookiepedia. There is also a WikiLeaks, but that is actually a spinoff from WikiLeaks. They just got cute.
I believe it was a satire of WikiLeaks. It was WikiLeaks was like
something
a Twitter.
Like it's like a thing. It was there's both actually. I think there's someone who was involved in WikiLeaks who also has WikiLeaks, and then there was like a hashtag WikiLeaks that got to be a satire of WikiLeaks, sort of taking place in the Star Wars universe. So instead of going into like the whole thing, I wanted to share something that I literally learned today in one of the little documentaries that I watched, like mini documentaries I watched, which is the whole lore of this series came to be official between the first Star Wars and this one. Because like the first Star Wars, if you watch the original crawl, there's no episode 4. This became episode 5. The original crawl for the original release of the first Star Wars movie is not called episode 4.
I could have sworn watching it as a kid that it was episode 4. No?
Nope.
Oh, wow. This is
it became
mind-blowing.
episode 4 when this became episode 5.
Huh.
Now, it was conceived as episode 4, I believe, originally, but just not called that. The lore got cemented into place between the two, largely through conversations between George Lucas and the woman that wrote the original screenplay, which I did not know, named Lee Brackett. And she was known as the Queen of Space Opera. Her film credits include The Big Sleep, Rio Bravo, and The Long Goodbye.
Those are some pretty important films.
Why haven't I heard of this woman before?
That seems relevant. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
what I'm embarrassed to him is I know who co-wrote it. I mean, the other screenwriter that's
Lawrence
prominent
Kasdan.
is Lawrence Kasdan, who's, Raiders of the Lost Ark, The Big Chill, and so on and so forth.
Yep. And I am now going to go find her first novel, and I'm going to nominate it for discussion between us. It is called No Good from a Corpse, and it is credited as being the first example of my favorite genre, space noir.
Oh. Ooh.
Yeah, maybe I'll take a look at, let you know, I'll read a chapter and let you know if it seems worth doing. She's written several other books. She was given a posthumous Hugo, and indeed she died shortly after delivering the script to Lucas.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it was rewritten by Kasdan.
Yeah.
People who have read both point out there's huge differences.
Oh, interesting.
But that the basic arc and story beats remain the same.
Okay.
So, and she's the one who kind of came up with a lot of the lore. So,
which we will
all very cool.
Yeah. The only other big piece of trivia that I do think is worth noting, I mean, not everyone necessarily knows this, but correct me if I'm wrong, Mark Hamill, who plays Luke, was in a very serious car accident between the filming of Star Wars and the filming of Empire, correct? Am I wrong about this?
But
okay.
The scars had mostly healed by the time they filmed. That particular, they did the attack to justify the scars, I don't think is actually.
Oh, no, that's not what I was saying. I was just saying, I know that was a big, I think people comment that they think Hamill looks different in Empire as opposed to Star Wars. But
I don't know if that, I remember thinking that. I don't know if he looks that different.
I don't think it's that huge of a difference. No.
Yeah.
He looks a little more jacked in this one. There is no denying that.
Yeah, but of course, on the scale of what actors look like now when they're jacked.
Yeah.
I mean, he has some body fat on him, which is would not be allowed today. I thought you were going to go with my favorite piece of trivia, which is Harrison Ford ad-libbing I Know.
Yes. Well, that I did know, but I just didn't, that's... And also the fact, the other, piece of trivia, which we will talk about, is I believe that Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher were, in fact...
Oh, yeah, they fucked.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And good for both of them, really.
Oh, God. There's two... I mean... I would be kind of a shame if they hadn't. That's that chemistry, not taking advantage of it off screen. I don't know. Better people than I. And I guess they're not. They're not better people than I. Okay. So Chekhov's what's it, Dad?
Yes, Anna, I am your father.
Yeah.
No. Sorry.
Chekhov's what's it, Dan?
Is for me absolutely Chekhov's Not My Fault, the fact that it's not just that Han keeps saying it's not my fault. My favorite one is when Lando says it's not my fault at the very end. It's a great callback. It really is.
I'm going to go with Chekhov's There Is Another.
Yep. And it's not even going to appear until the third film. So yeah, that's a fair point.
When he contacts her via the Force, you get the, there is the hint.
Well, let me ask you a question though. In terms of that, There Is Another. Did you guess who that was? When we were kids, did you know? Because I did not. Just to be clear,
I don't think I did. Yeah. I think that seemed like a mystery, and I think also it says something about how far we have come in terms of gender representation in science fiction. Mm-hmm. That I don't think it occurred to a lot of people.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. I think that's a fair point.
I remember thinking it could be Han.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, really, there weren't a ton of options. That or as a new character. So, But yes, I remember being legitimately surprised by that.
C-3PO.
So, yeah.
C-3PO.
Yeah. The ultimate appeaser. All right.
All right, Dan, let's begin. Let's get to the plot.
We're going to go to the plot. I want to start this with a warning. Listen, Star Wars nerds. I'm not recounting every beat in this film, okay? We all know mostly the plot. There are going to be some people not as familiar with the plot. I'm just going to be talking about the basics here, and then we're going to talk about how awesome the film is, all right? So just, if I leave something out, I don't want to hear it. Let's start with Act 1, Dunkirk in space. The Rebel Alliance has established a new base on the ice planet of Hoth, and boy, does Lord Vader really want to find them. And Luke Skywalker, the Tatooine farm boy who destroyed the Death Star. On Hoth, Luke and his Tauntaun are felled by an ice creature while on patrol, while Han is busy sassing Leia. Luke manages to free himself by using the Force, and just before passing out, sees Obi-Wan tell him to go to the Dagobah system to be trained by Yoda. Luke is then rescued by Han, who keeps Luke warm by slicing open his own Tauntaun. I have to admit, I always remember as a kid thinking, so Han was the only other person who used the lightsaber. Like, that somehow seemed very significant to me at the time. Okay. An Imperial probe sends back word about life forms on Hoth, and Vader orders the fleet to attack. The rebels, alerted to the Imperial fleet, execute a Dunkirk-style space retreat despite a ground assault of AT-ATs and a pretty large fleet orbiting the planet. Han evacuates Leia and C-3PO on the Millennium Falcon just as Vader arrives. After leading the rebel fighters against the Imperial ground forces, Luke takes R2-D2 on an X-Wing and heads to the Dagobah system. All right, Anna, I apologize for this minor critique, but is it me or are Han Solo and Chewbacca not the galaxy's best mechanics? I mean, they had weeks to fix the Millennium Falcon, and they still can't get that hyperdrive to work? What's going on here?
Maybe this is a weak defense, but I think it's very, very possible they couldn't get parts.
It's true. Hoth is pretty remote.
I mean, Hoth is very remote. Probably specialized parts needed. It's the only one of its kind in the entire galaxy. Yeah. There's only one Millennium Falcon. I mean, I don't know how like you can switch out how many parts are exchangeable for like other kinds of parts.
Also, I hear that Galaxy's Amazon.com is really piss poor on delivery. I'm just pointing that out.
Also, I want to point out, I was thinking about this. Questions that don't occur to you when you see it the first time or first 20 times. Mm-hmm. Chewie must have very delicate little paws underneath all that fur.
Yes. He's pretty nimble.
Or he's a bad mechanic.
That could be it.
I think he has delicate little paws, though, because he seems to be doing very fine work with C-3PO.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. So. Yes. He does. He's able to put C-3PO back together. That's a good point.
Now, Dan, should we talk about the Battle at Hoth?
Let's talk about the Battle of Hoth. Let's get into this, because there's been a lot written about this. I think most famously Spencer Ackerman has a piece at Wired in which he royally critiques the Imperial strategy.
It's got a lot of good points, Dan.
Okay. So go on. Like, what do you like? What are the critiques?
Thing you don't have to be like a war journalist like Spencer Ackerman to see that the AT-ATs are terrible assault vehicles.
They don't seem like the most reliable vehicles. Yeah, like it seems like if you were going to if you could trip something up with a tow cable, that seems wild. Like I did love the fact that these things are impervious to lasers, but all we got to do is put a little tow cable. Totally falls. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems like you could just string up like clothesline around a base and it would work, right? And also someone had started this debate on Blue Sky and someone was like, well, they might be good over rough terrain. Okay, why an ice planet then? Yeah. There is a place you want to use treads. Is that an ice planet?
I was gonna say space tanks seem like a better thing to do than the AT-AT. There is no denying. I understand why the AT-AT looks really goddamn cool. I don't know about you. When I first saw those, I was like, that is so cool.
They look really cool. Yeah. And as Ben Hameen noted, fascism is all about aesthetics.
That is a good point. Yes. As an aesthetic.
Sort of in that paradigm.
Yeah.
But here is what I think is Spencer's best point, which was why destroy the shield? Actually, if you keep the shield up, if the Empire let them keep the shield up, it means they only have one exit.
That is correct. But I will say this is where
and you just sit outside the exit. It's just it's a shooting gallery. It's like
no. This is where I'm going to dissent from Ackerman because they actually have an explanation for this. In the film, we see the ships leave with the fighters. The ion cannon fires. It incapacitates one of the Star Destroyers. So
space is big.
And
the ion cannon is small. And I think if you surround the exit from the shield with enough destroyers and what is okay. All right. So I think that could have worked, right?
You could argue what would have made sense would have been to impose a siege on Hoth. That's the part I agree with. You didn't necessarily have to overrun it. You could have just said, fine, we'll wait you out.
Don't put your Star Destroyers in a line outside. Off the planet. That's not very effective either.
Well, let's be honest. One of the things we've learned during Empire is that not all of the Imperial commanders are really top shelf.
Which brings us to...
Yes?
This is the beginning of killing off anyone that makes a mistake.
Right. Well, no, it's even worse than that, but that gets to the IR portion of the thing.
Well,
so
we'll reserve that.
But let me this way. Oh, yeah. Let's hold off on that.
A couple more things. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Vader going to the base himself. Why do that?
Again, a couple of things here. First, in a fascist regime...
It's emotionally justified, sure.
Yeah. But the other thing is that Vader is clearly at this point intent on capturing Skywalker. That's what he cares about. He doesn't care about destroying the rebels. He thinks they're insignificant. He wants to get Skywalker. I would assume he needs to be on the planet to be able to sense it. So that I'm willing to forgive.
But here's my big question. This is
Okay.
actually not a flaw in Vader's plan. Why do you have your secret base on Hoth? Like, presumably they've been there for weeks. They can't get their speeders to run, right? Like they're still, it's too cold for like these kinds of activity, right? They don't have a good defense setup. What are they doing there? Like,
well, okay, no, I'll push back on this for a couple of things. First of all, they do have a good defense setup. They apparently have an impenetrable shield, so good for them.
Except it's penetrable by ships. Yes. It's just not impenetrable by lasers. That seems like not a very good shield to me.
Actually, that seems like not entirely great screenwriting to me, but that's a whole separate conversation. But the other thing is,
if you say that, then it just becomes this is about we're not living in the world of the movie anymore.
But hold on,
like this is poor planning. It's not Vader being a bad strategist.
But the other thing I will say, is it is precisely because it is an inhospitable environment that it makes sense that they would set up a base there. In other words, the presumption is that the Empire surely wouldn't be looking for them in Hoth because no one would presumably be able to survive in Hoth. It makes sense that you would set up a base in a place that people aren't expecting humans to occupy. So that I didn't have as much of a problem.
But I hear the Amazon delivery there is really bad. So.
But the other thing I was surprised by, and I still, every time I watch this, I don't get this. There should have been TIE fighters engaging in the attack as well. We never see TIE fighters on the ground assault. That is a flaw. I don't know what the hell's going on. Maybe it's because there's a leadership transition, among the Starfleet. I'm not going to question that. It's a bad move, and Vader should know better.
It was bad. The admiral that decides to drop out of hyperspace it's too
he felt surprised was the best advice. Yes,
right.
Yes,
he does it too close to the planet. That was a mistake.
That was Admiral Ozzel. Yes, and
that was a mistake.
R.I.P. Admiral Ozzel, who frankly deserved it, but that's a whole separate conversation.
I don't know. Does die like you?
Yeah, die is a little rough.
All right, Act 2.
All right, let's go to Act 2. Han and Leia play hide and seek. The Millennium Falcon can't jump to light speed, so they evade the Imperial fleet by heading into an asteroid field. They hide in a cave and repair the ship, offering multiple opportunities for Han and Leia to continue their excellent banter. While they hide out, Vader consults with the Emperor and persuades him that Luke can be turned to the dark side. He also seeks out bounty hunters to track down the Falcon. It turns out that was no cave. And the Falcon escapes a giant creature just in time. Again, Anna, I don't know about you, that was a legitimate, this film is chock full of mini plot twists that I remember being legitimately surprised by when we were watching for the first time. And the idea that this wasn't a cave, but it was actually alien, just lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Still unable to jump to light speed, Han pilots the Millennium Falcon to attack the Imperial Star Destroyer Avenger and then attaches itself to the destroyer, kind of like a moth, or a remora, one of the two. They detach as the Imperial fleet dumps its garbage and head off to Bespin to seek out Lando Calrissian, an old friend of Han's. Unfortunately, there appears to be a bounty hunter on their tail. All right, Anna, let's get to the important question. There are plenty of older films that we have watched where, for lack of a better way of putting it, some things have not aged well. How well do you think the Han-Leia courtship holds up to 21st century scrutiny?
It's a little skeevy. The scene on the Millennium Falcon where he kind of corners her.
Yeah.
You know? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think on the grand scale of skeevy, it's not terrible. Also, I mean, we have to allow for humanness, right? Mm-hmm. It is, when you get into a place where you're her mouth says no, but her body says yes. But when she says don't do that, she's not pulling away.
Right. No, this is the thing about this plot, about their relationship, is that exactly the issue is that Leia constantly is saying things, but any interpretation of her body language seems very clear that she's also clearly drawn to Han.
And also when she says don't do that and he says why, she says your hands are dirty, mm-hmm. or she says my hands are dirty, I think. Yeah. And mm-hmm. that's not the same as don't touch
right
me.
I'm not uncomfortable. Yeah, exactly.
Also
I legitimately love their argument on Hoth where he says it's about the way you feel about me, when they're arguing in the hallway.
Yeah, and I remember thinking all of that dialogue being a lot more clever than it sounded to me now.
Yeah. You know what it is? It's not the dialogue itself. It is honestly the acting. There's a brief moment, I don't know if you remember this, there's a brief moment where Han is saying Leia likes her, and they're arguing, and then a guy walks right between them.
Yeah.
And Harrison Ford plays that moment perfectly. It's just a perfect, like, tiny little moment that, you know, feels grounded, and it works. Again,
He's so good.
And you're right. The dialogue is nothing to write home about in all of these, except the scoundrel part. I still like that. I think that holds up. But it's also not. It's not like, oh, I had, you know, like I say, it's not cringe, I guess would be the way to put it.
It's not cringe. It just, it does feel adolescent, but not in a terrible way.
Right.
I mean, this is a goofy, I mean, it's not a goofy movie, but it's a movie for
adolescents.
Kind of. I mean, like, obviously we're no longer adolescents and we still loved it, but it's a comic book movie on some level, right? And also, I mean, I was like, you know, preteen or whatever, not even, I was younger than that.
Yeah.
And it seemed very sophisticated to me.
Yes, exactly.
I think it, you know, it works for a lot of different ages. It's like juvenile enough that juveniles kind of can get it and laugh at it. And then it's bantery enough.
And there's enough chemistry between Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher.
The chemistry is insane.
It's just palpable. It's just ridiculous. Harrison Ford is so good in this film. Carrie Fisher is great, but like in some ways, Harrison Ford has a slightly heavier lift that he has to do. He's given more to do, and he does.
And and he's a, you know, obviously a leading man, but he's got such great comic timing.
Yes. Like, oh God. Yes.
And that is what carries this role, right?
You know what?
It's his charisma, but he just gets every beat. And like we talked about it, how that I know was his improvisation.
Yeah.
It's not just that line, right? It's the whole way it happens.
Right.
Like it just works on every level. It's one of the most memorable movie. I put it like top 10 memorable movie moments.
Yeah.
Right. And it's another thing. I think it's a better line and kind of a better twist in its own way than Luke, I am your father.
Yeah. Well, look this way. That's the line that's the kind of line that you could watch again and again and appreciate. It's like the scene in Out of Sight between George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez. It just clicks. The other thing I would add on this, I think this doubles down on your point about Harrison Ford. It's not just that Harrison Ford has great chemistry and comic timing with Carrie Fisher. He also is doing this with C-3PO. He is doing it with Chewbacca, and he's doing it with Lando when they get, you know, to Bespin. He clicks with, and Luke, not to mention, he actually doesn't have a ton of time with Luke, but exactly, with everyone else, he clicks with everyone. You know, like he actually made, you know, like the dialogue between him and 3PO is hysterical.
He has like a throwaway scene with like one of the generals on the, you know, on Hoth, and that works. And the scene that really works with Luke, the one moment he has with Luke, it was pointed out in one of the YouTube things I watched, is when Luke is saying goodbye to him.
Right.
And they have this like little moment.
It's an unspoken moment. There's no,
Yeah. There's no dialogue. They say goodbye to each other. And then there's this just like little, like, we are comrades, we are brothers, kind of like, you feel it between the two of them.
No, that's the thing that's palpable and so great about this film. And it really works. All right. You know what? We'll be right.
Speaking of palpable.
We'll be right back after you unlearn what you have learned and listen to these ads.
Welcome back, scruffy nerf herders.
We're back. Let's start to Act 3. Okay.
All right.
Narrative must you retell. Okay. Luke and R2-D2 crash land on Dagobah. They encounter a small, wizened creature who initially seems to be providing comic relief, but is actually the Jedi Master Yoda. He tries to train Luke, but the boy is impatient and immature and has difficulties comprehending the power of the Force. He's making progress, but then has a vision of his friends in trouble. Rejecting Yoda's advice to stay and finish his training, he and R2 head to Cloud City. And guess what? Turns out Luke's vision was well-founded. The Millennium Falcon arrives at Bespin with Lando pouring on the charm, but it turns out that he made a deal with Vader to preserve Bespin's independence. Vader uses Han, Leia, and Chewie as bait for Luke. Han gets tortured and then frozen in carbonite. He is turned over to the bounty hunter Boba Fett, who returns Han to Tatooine and Jabba. Vader keeps altering his deal with Lando, which eventually leads Lando to break the deal and help Leia and Chewbacca
Takes him
escape.
a while
Yeah.
to realize that Vader's not a man of his word.
Yeah. Okay, Anna, there is a ton to chew on in these scenes. First of all, again, this is where, like, we have to remember, like, someone seeing this film for the first time. I actually think we might underestimate the very clever fake out of Yoda initially appearing as comic relief before revealing himself. I mean, like, I don't know if I remember that being surprised by that, but like in retrospect, the idea that this tiny little person, Muppet, is actually the great Jedi Master is kind of legitimately surprising. And actually, in some ways, makes the audience have the same kind of journey as Luke, because Luke clearly underestimates this character as well and then realizes what's going on.
Yeah, it's hard for me to put myself in the place of like watching this and not knowing that.
Right.
And I'm trying to think about if this is a place where incipient critique of capitalism, like the toys were spoilers, right?
I don't know. I'm trying to remember if I knew about Yoda before watching the film. It's an interesting question.
Although that's the thing about if you release a toy for every fucking character in the movie, then it doesn't matter if there's a Yoda. You're not necessarily going to assume that Yoda's important.
Right, exactly.
I do think it's a good fake out, even if you know.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
It tells us about both Yoda and Luke.
And Luke. No, that's an excellent point. I agree. And also, for all the hokiness of the Force, and I remember, like, as a kid, that was the part of the original trilogy that I always thought, oh, come on, give me a break. This film actually takes it seriously and does so in a way, like, honestly, my favorite line in the entire, like, sequence on Dagobah is when Luke encounters the cave and says, what's in there? And Yoda says, only what you take with you, which is a really good line. And, like,
it's a really good line. Yeah.
Yeah. It just captures it. Yeah.
I think I will observe here that Luke is a whiny baby this entire movie. Like, he really is not in his most attractive space for most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, Hamill is great and he's a charismatic character and actor, but he often is a whiny baby.
Oh no! It's like I remember the first time as an adult, I think, rewatching the original Star Wars and thinking, you whiny little shit. Like, I was going to go to Tachi Station to pick up some power converters. Like, just classic teen, angst.
And he's just not much of he just hasn't improved much when he's aged a few years. And
exactly.
There's a couple of nice touches, though. At one point, arguing with Yoda to say please teach me. And he says, I'm ready. And then he bumps his head on the roof of Yoda's little shack. And that's funny.
Yeah.
And then the time where he says, I'm not afraid. And Yoda's like, you will be.
Yeah.
And which underscores, like, not being afraid is not the same as being brave.
Right.
And gets us to the fact that the Force is not the same as fighting, right? The Force is not intended to fight. The Force is a power. And
it invests the stakes of the training. It makes it clear, look, this is not like, just learning jujitsu or something. This is going to be something that is more significant than that.
It's a philosophy.
Yes, exactly.
It is not a fighting technique.
Yeah.
It is a philosophy.
Yeah.
I will say, as a kid, I found that cave scene harrowing. Like, I could not watch it for a while.
Wow.
Like, it really scared me. And I can't kind of put my head quite in the place where it was, that it was so frightening to me. Maybe it's I don't want to know myself, Dan. Maybe
I do think, correct me if I'm wrong, it is also the only use of, like, slow-mo in the entire Star Wars canon.
That you have done more trivia work than I have.
I believe that's the case. It's just I was struck by watching it this time because, like, it's shot in a slightly different way. Like, it's he's moving more slowly. There's this dreamlike element to it, which makes sense given what we're about. And again, Irving Kershner does a great job. All right, let's get to the last act. Spoiler alert. Luke arrives at Bespin, but too late to retrieve Han or help Leia and Chewbacca. He encounters Vader, and they have a pretty epic fucking duel before Vader cuts Luke's hand off. He then tells Luke that Obi-Wan lied, and Vader is Luke's father. I know. Luke takes this news poorly. I like writing that. I'm sorry. Luke takes this news poorly and falls into an air shaft, landing beneath Cloud City and latching onto an antenna. He does.
I have to assume that he was using the Force to control his fall there.
One would assume, although, like, he's in a fair amount of pain, but one would hope that's what he did. Yes.
Yeah, because that's a lot of luck.
Yeah.
I think he is.
That's fair. He uses the Force to contact Leia, who orders the Falcon to return and rescue him, Pursued by TIE fighters and Vader's Star Destroyer, R2-D2 reactivates the Falcon's hyperdrive, allowing them to escape. Surprisingly, Vader does not force choke anyone in response, at least that we see on film. Yes. Back with the Rebel fleet, Luke is given a robotic prosthesis to replace his missing hand. He and Leia agree to rendezvous with Lando and Chewbacca once they find Han on Tatooine. Oh, Anna, I just want to watch Return of the Jedi again. I will say this. I want to add, the thing that blew me away was in this final act is when you see there's a shot, there's like an establishing shot of Luke and Vader, like with like steam rising, and it is goddamn epic. It's like gorgeously shot. The sound quality in this film is amazing. I think the other thing I'd forgotten was how much the sound effects and John Williams' score does a lot of the work. Like the sound when Yoda is able to lift the X-Wing onto the land. It's a great like score. The score at the end of the film, just fantastic.
Pew, pew, pew. The pew pews are good. I texted you this. I was watching it with all the animals, as I watch most of my films. And during the big battle scene, Exley got scared. And
really?
Yeah. He wanted to get under the blankets. At first he was going to leave the bed, and he gave me this look of like, I don't like this, Mom. And so I was like, well, do you want to get under covers? And that makes him feel better. He gets under covers.
Okay.
The cats were watching attentively. Like, they
the cats were taking notes from him.
The cats are taking notes. They like the violent scenes in most movies that I watch. Now, you could say this is just that things are moving quickly, and they're like just cats are like watching the fast moving things on the screen, or yes, taking notes. Molly Murder Kitten.
I could see Bram and Molly going, Vader, what the hell are you doing, man, on Hoth? I mean, you call that a ground assault? Come on!
Well, Molly...
I got it!
Molly, has a World War II thing and often thinks of the Roman Empire. Like, I don't know. Bram is just kind of, he likes shiny things. Bram is not so much of a military tactician. Let me tell you right now, you can see Bram playing with his, like, he has a toy that's like basically just a piece of wire.
Yeah.
And he like pushes it around and the other end moves and it surprises the shit out of him. Like he's...
Are you saying Bram is just kind of nice but pretty?
Yeah, Bram is very nice but pretty. But I like that about him. He's my little baby. He's my little baby. All right. Enough discussion of cute things. Yep. Although I want to point out before we leave this section, that encounter between, especially the last part of the encounter between Vader and Luke, I never noticed until today.
Oh, yeah.
It's a repeat of the cave scene.
Oh, in the sense of...
You walk into a cave, like there's the last part of that battle before Vader backs him out into the thing that's...
Oh, before into like the interior, the interior...
They're in a cave. They're in a cave setup. And it's shot...
It's Chekhov's cave.
Chekhov's
cave.
Yeah. That's right.
Fair enough.
Okay. Dan.
Yes, Anna.
Is there IR in this little movie?
Anna, the odds of me being able to tell you all the IR in this film are 750 to 1. But I will give it a whirl. And I will say this. I was pleasantly surprised by all the IR in this film. I think we've had this conversation before that, like, there is plenty of IR in the prequel trilogy, even though I think the prequel trilogy...
Too much.
They're bad films. And, like, this is just space battle, so I thought. But... watching it again, and I have to admit, I might be informed here by our love of Andor as well. There is clearly a fair amount going on, and particularly from the Imperial side, which is we see classic Imperial strategy here in terms of how you run an empire. An empire, unlike a normal state, usually has asymmetric relations between the sort of metropole and the outlying provinces. And we see that in the Imperial strategy here. The Empire is not all-knowing and all-seeing. They need to figure out, where things are going. That's why they keep launching all these probes. And they also can't control everything. They didn't control Bespin before, they show up. It's supposed to be a small little, mining facility. But they apply force when necessary to get what they want, which is what they do in terms of Bespin. And you also see the Empire relying on bounty hunters because they are not necessarily going to be able to track everything. Admittedly, not the most competent bunch of people. But why are they not the most competent bunch of people? Because let's be honest, Darth Vader has, I would say, received a, strange new respect in this century of like, oh, he was such a badass. And Rogue One didn't help with this because there's that amazing scene where like he uses the Force and so on and so forth to try to get the plans, you know. Vader is a horrible leader. This is where I am in complete agreement with Spencer Ackerman, and demonstrates repeatedly his inability to credibly commit to anything. And the problem is that when you are dealing with someone who can't credibly commit, you're not going to get the best out of your people. Okay? On Bespin, he keeps altering the deal. He literally keeps altering the deal. Meaning that he turns even a weasel like Lando Calrissian. Oh, side note here, we should mention, speaking of great, you know, acting and casting, Billy D. Williams fucking rocks in this film.
Originally auditioned for Han Solo.
He would have been great as Han as well. Yeah, I think he would have been fantastic as Han. He is fantastic as Lando. And like, what is striking to me is I don't know how much screen time he actually has. He does a tremendous amount with what little he's given.
Well, we remember him as a main character, even though he doesn't have a ton of screen time.
Yeah.
Also, given this, which is all of what he does is believable.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
you believe his initial greeting, you believe that he double crossed them, and then you believe that he triple cross, right?
Exactly.
Like it all works. The betrayal from Vader, and this is where we have, for plot reasons, Vader has to be terrible, right? Yeah. Because we believe that Lando has now been disappointed, and like he's now like, all right, fine, fuck this.
Yes.
Like he has an Andorian turn.
There we go. Yes, exactly. But the point is that Vader keeps not fulfilling his promises, which causes Lando to eventually turn against him. Yeah. He punishes incompetent subordinates, and that's fair, okay? If you're running a Starfleet and like, you know, someone behaves incompetently, you absolutely punish them. But he also punishes those who were honorable enough to actually take responsibility and give him honest but bad news. And I'm thinking here in particular of Captain Nita, who's the head of the Star Destroyer Avenger, who loses the Millennium Falcon. He also, you know, that doesn't inspire a ton of loyalty.
No.
And the contrast, by the way, is with the Rebel commanders. You see Leia, and you also see like the Rebel command, the one in charge on Hoth. They're both pretty inspiring leaders. They exercise gravitas. By the way, I just realized a side note to, we were talking about Han and Leia's relationship and how well, you know, what's aged or not. I think one of the reasons sometimes people might not understand or appreciate it is because, let's be honest, when we get to Return of the Jedi, there is an arc of Leia going from like being like super important prince who like exercises power to, by the time we get to Return of the Jedi, she's either in a space bikini or like in Earth goddess mother mode. She is not that in this film, though.
Not for the first like half. And I wrote this down actually, which is the first half, she is like feminist icon.
Exactly. Yes,
you know, yes. She is like kicking ass, taking names.
Right.
When she gives the orders about how the attack's going to go, it is concise, it is clear.
She's a leader. She is exercising leadership. She's fantastic. Yeah.
She is reluctant to leave the base, but then gives the all clear for evacuation. She has a good battle plan.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then it does pivot pretty hard to her being a reactor rather than than an actor. And then by the time you get to, you know, the next movie.
Right. No. Like the way I would put it is like, she has one of the best lines when she's on the Falcon, which when she says, "I am not a committee." I just love that. It's a
this
great line.
This is not time. Oh yeah. He says, "I don't want to take this to committee."
Yeah, it's like, "I am not a committee." Yes. What my friend Erin Simpson is like, that's her tagline, you know, works for her perfectly. But on Bespin, that's the moment where you sort of see the change, because remember, Han tells Chewie, the princess, you've got to look after the princess. And I'm like, you know what? She was pretty good looking after herself. I mean, yeah, Chewie should obviously help, but like that's almost the moment where you see the switch.
It is unfortunately also the place where it's the, you know, "I know" line. And as much as I love that line, it actually comes from not a great place.
It's still a great line, but I mean, yes, like he never says "I love you" back. I was like,
and in fact, that Harrison Ford, when he's been given interviews about it, says basically, well, he uses the term badass. Like if Han's going to be a badass, he's going to be a badass at the end. And I would say asshole. Like I think he explicitly says, "What would a woman want to hear?" And then not giving her what she wants to hear. Like a woman would want to hear, "I love you too."
Right. Yeah.
And what he says is "I know."
Yeah.
And that's a perfectly Han, but kind of a shitty thing to say.
I mean, he's on a time. The thing about Han, go ahead.
A reread, another read I have seen of their relationship, though, that I like, is that was a kind of fleeting thing, and they were never going to be able to hold together.
I mean,
right?
you can argue that
they
this
have a kid, but like
no, like
it's
the sequel trilogy does live up to that. It suggests that they didn't last all that long, so that's fair.
Yeah. He's not the marrying kind.
No. And I guess the way I would put it is that in some ways that response is like Han Solo walks this tightrope between asshole and charismatic. And in some ways,
oh no, he's a charismatic asshole. It's all part of it. It's all
right. But like
it's all the same thing.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And so I guess
dated a type of
fair enough, Anna. I'm not going to dispute that.
I know this type. Yeah. This movie might be to blame for the entire romantic history.
Honestly, like that's the thing. Like watching this, it does represent that sort of classic, like the sort of taming of the shrew kind of thing. But that said, he's so good in it. Like
I know.
And that's the thing. Like I think one of the problems with 21st century readings of stuff sometimes is like, no, he's not charming. He's just an asshole. And so like you wind up draining the character of all that. You can't drain the charisma from Harrison Ford in this film.
No.
That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, Anna, I have a question for you.
Oh, what is it, Dan?
Is there a critique of capitalism in this film?
Dan, I've had some labor difficulties. But I did come up with a critique of capitalism small enough to avoid the notice of the Empire.
Mm-hmm.
The Force is literally solidarity. The Force is resistance to the oppression of extractive capitalism. It is anti-racist, it is gender and species inclusive. Think about what Yoda says, judge me by my size, do you? It reveres the lived experience of everyone. Luminous beings
are we, not this crude matter. Yeah.
And I think in theory, and in this original introduction, the Force is accessible to everyone. I think that's part of kind of Yoda's spiel. It's in life. It is in all things. It exists in relationship between all things. And it's only really later episodes we get the kind of eugenics argument.
Well, which, by the way, makes no sense. That's a whole separate conversation. No. But like, yeah.
It makes more sense as something that's accessible to everyone. But that some people might be more inclined to than others. But that it benefits from study, and that it is a philosophy and not a fighting technique. It is a philosophy and not something that you were born with or not born with.
Right.
And I think Luke articulates the skepticism that keeps people from embracing solidarity as the only way to free ourselves from the yoke of the market.
Oh.
When Yoda tries to point out the power of the Force, he says, I don't believe it. And then Yoda says,
that is why you fail.
Thank you, Dan.
Sorry.
Yes, he says, that is why you fail. And I think that's actually pretty powerful reading, to be honest. And it is small enough to avoid the notice of the Empire, but large enough to actually be important. And I'm being a little, I guess this is me taking the Force kind of seriously. I think that as an idea, like as a philosophy, it is important if you can believe that we are all connected and that is the way we resist, fascism, totalitarianism, and the yoke of the market. So, the end. I'm going to be sincere, much like this.
No, this film is sincere, and also this, as I said, I agree with you. This film treats the Force better than the subsequent iterations of it, I guess would be the way to put it.
Yeah, I think that George Lucas, for all of his many faults, is a sincere person.
Oh yeah.
Right, and these movies, I think. The earlier, this movie and obviously the first one are very serious about their religious, spiritual philosophy.
Yeah.
I think that as you kind of get further into the extractive capitalism of this IP.
Yep.
And then you end up with Andor, where actually it kind of comes full circle. Where I think the yoke of empire, of totalitarianism, fascism, and corruption of bureaucracy and whatnot are very real, and like he's very interested in that, and that's one of the reasons we love it, right? But also there is this competing narrative about resistance to it and taking that resistance very seriously,
right?
So anyway, can't wait for Andor. Can't wait. Supposedly not coming till next year now.
Oh, well, at least the strike's over and they're filming at Warner Bros. It's so funny that you do the pew thing, because I have to admit I was thinking all today about Laura Dern during the pew thing in The Last Jedi, which is what we should probably do at some point. It's time for Discordant Notes. This is where we take questions from the Discord, from our patrons, and answer them in the podcast. I think we actually addressed most of the questions that were actually raised in the Discord, except one. This is from Nate Meyer. How do the politics of this play for an audience that has never known an America other than the one that is technologically superior to its opponents and is generally fighting or supporting fighting ragtag groups of fighters taking on the big technological empire?
Sorry. America is supporting the ragtag groups of fighters?
No. I think supporting those fighting the ragtag groups of fighters.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes. I was just like,
clear.
yeah.
Although, I mean, so this, how do I put this? I guess my foreign policy answer is, I think what Nate is trying to reference is the fact that back when this movie came out in 1980, we were seeing the emergence of what was eventually referred to as the Reagan Doctrine, which was the United States actually supporting the ragtag groups of fighters, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, the Contras in Nicaragua. But, first of all, none of those ragtag groups of fighters that we were supporting turned out well. It ended badly for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, for the Contras in Nicaragua, for the Khmer Rouge, who we were supporting in Cambodia.
Also, ragtag doesn't mean side of justice.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Like, it doesn't.
In fact, I thought about this. Sorry. I mean, this is your shtick, but like,
no, go ahead.
In The Crawl, it calls the rebels freedom fighters.
Right.
What do most of us now associate? Like, the freedom fighters is a propaganda term.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. To like whoever the America's supporting, those are the freedom fighters. Right. And I think that I think what America still posits that we're supporting the ragtag groups, even when we're not, right?
Although we are sometimes. I mean, I leave this way. I think there's a danger of being too cynical about this.
Sometimes the ragtag groups are just not the good guys.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you can't.
Yeah. The Houthis, not the good guys. I have news for you. Like, They're not. Like, you might not want the U.S. to be doing what it's doing in the Middle East. Trust me, you don't want the Houthis to be doing what they're doing either. So, like, it gets complicated. The other thing is that I think the other thing I'd push back on is the idea that the rebels are less technologically sophisticated than the Empire doesn't strike me as accurate. What would be more accurate to say is that the rebels are a little craftier in terms of using nature to favor them. But I think that's different from their technology isn't worse. At least not from what I recall.
Yeah, they just don't have as big guns.
Yeah.
Is that worse technology? I guess on some level, a bigger gun is always better. I don't know.
It just means they're poorer. It doesn't mean they're technologically impoverished. That was my...
Yeah, they seem to have they're just have fewer numbers.
Right.
And and they're not as spread out over, they can't communicate over vast distances in the way that the Empire can. They can't, dispatch troops.
Right.
To like locations based on intelligence. They're fighting under,
they are the underdog.
Yeah, they're the underdog, and they're having to operate in secret.
Right. Absolutely.
Which is a
tougher thing to do.
Yeah.
All right.
Creates another barrier.
This is not going to take long. Let's just get to this. Cannon or fodder, Anna?
I don't know. It's a laser cannon, Dan.
It's an ion cannon.
This is an ion cannon.
Yeah.
This is ion cannon.
It belongs in the canon. It's not even close. I mean, it's a great film.
It is almost an unproblematic fave. Like, it is like so close to unproblematic fave. And if it's been a while since you've seen it, please watch.
Yeah.
It will make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of skipped over this, but like, seriously formative movie for me, and I'm sure for you too.
Yeah.
Like, this movie is why we're talking right now.
Yeah. This and the original Star Wars. Again, the thing about this film is that the original Star Wars was really good. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. It felt like the special effects at the time were amazing. Rewatching this reminded me that, oh yeah, Empire was even better. And in some ways it sort of warped your expectations. It was like, oh my God, you did improve on it. That's amazing. And the other thing, and I think you said this originally, but it's worth pointing out, this film holds up as a sort of sci-fi. It doesn't feel like an old film. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, some of the tech looks a little clunky, but like, and admittedly we were watching the special edition, but still, like, the effects are still great. The space battles are still fantastic.
I mean, there's a ton of stuff that's come out remastered and looks like shit.
Yes.
And this, I just can't, I kept texting you.
Yeah.
I cannot believe how good this looks.
Yeah.
Like, the special effects and all. Like, there's a few special effects that you can that look kind of hokey.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one of the ones that holds up is the little holograms.
Yes.
Like, Although that might be from doing a re-digitizing.
No, I don't think they did. I mean, like this way, like I think the original shot of like Vader, like in a little hologram when they're about to destroy the shield generator, that was original. That I'm quite certain. The one that they added is when we see the Emperor. That was was a special edition ad.
It looks great. It sounds great.
Yeah.
And also not just the special effects stuff.
Yeah.
But when Luke is on Dagobah, it's very swampy.
It feels
and real.
fecund. Yeah.
And
yeah. It's great.
It's great. Yep. Totally great.
Oh, but wait, I think we're in an asteroid field.
Is that an asteroid? Sorry. Yes. Apparently some of those asteroids were potatoes and shoes. All right, debris field.
Yep.
Where we cover stuff we haven't already covered. Dan, what do you got?
Oh, God, I have a fair amount. So, first of all, this is just a small thing. Shout out to that Imperial officer who used Leia as a human shield when Luke appears. Like, I'd forgotten that. It was like, oh, wow, you're not just making sure that Luke won't, get you. You actually grab Leia and put her in front of you so you survive. Like, wow, that was amazing. Yes. Okay.
I will say that even for young Anna, the cruelty to the Tauntauns bothered me. I mean, the fact that he took him out knowing the Tauntaun was going to freeze. The Han took the Tauntaun out knowing he was going to freeze. That bothered me even at the time. And I also remember being grossed out by the slicing open the Tauntaun for the squishy guts. Although I remember boys being like, ooh, like it's the kind of thing that like young boys are like, ooh, guts.
It was pretty cool. Like, and also, again, it's a fantastic line. I thought they smelled bad on the outside is a great line.
Yes.
It's just fantastic. All right, we skipped over this part, but we need to bring up the fact that Leia keeps like Frenching Luke in this movie. I've got a new theory for this, watching it this time. Is it possible that this is just the custom on Alderaan? Maybe like Alderaan, like she just like Frenches
like
everyone.
French.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly.
Like the
French.
I'm just putting that out there.
Instead of the kissing on both cheeks.
Yeah.
It's the tonguing.
You just tongue everyone. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So on Dagobah, Luke says, Yoda picks up kind of, let's just to be frank, a turd looking thing.
Yeah.
Like maybe it's a protein bar.
It looks like a protein bar. Yeah.
And Luke says, that's my dinner. And then he takes it away. And then he just throws it off into the swamp. Give Yoda your turd-looking protein bar.
Luke keeps contradicting himself in that scene because there's I don't know if you noticed this. A little bit later, he tells R2 watch the camp, and then when they next cut to Luke, R2 is right outside the house wondering what the hell's going on. So like that didn't quite work. Yeah. Yep. Again, it's worth pointing out the humorous touches in this film really work. C-3PO is just a walking and sometimes not walking, just source of humor. Like when he's disconnected in Bespin, that's very funny. Even his opening line where he tells R2, I just said that it was cold in the princess's quarters. How are we going to dry, like how are we going to get our clothes dry? I have no idea. It's just a funny line. I really like it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I did wonder, why is Yoda on Dagobah? That it just occurred to me, like, yeah, what would the little guy be doing out there?
Yeah.
And then also on Yoda, him saying that Luke is too old to begin the training is pretty rich coming from a 700-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, you would think however old Luke is, like, what is he, like 20, 21? Like,
probably at that point,
that's like infancy, right?
Right.
For baby Yoda. So, I don't know. Pretty rich.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of Yoda, I just want to say this, and I will go with this to my grave. Yay, Muppet Yoda. Frank Oz does a fantastic job. Boo, CGI Yoda. The CGI version of Yoda is not as good. Like, having the real felt there, for lack of a way of putting it. Again, like, tremendous special effects where it's not fancy, but you believe that Muppet is a real person, is a real, like, character. And that's just well done.
Han is a real asset to the rebel forces. He is a tactical genius.
Mm-hmm. Yes, right? Yes, he is.
I think that we did not give that.
No, we did not. That's a fair point. Yeah. No, and you know what? Leia actually does sum up Han, which is you don't have many moments, but you have some. Like basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You need more from you?
All right, some special edition shit. So like as I said, one of the disturbing things as we've grown older, Anna, is that I can't remember exactly what they've added. I'm pretty sure that we didn't get a shot of the Hoth ice creature like as good as we do during the special edition. I think there's a few shots in Bespin that are new. They put in Ian McDiarmid as the Emperor. He wasn't originally the Emperor in the original filming. The only touch that I think was new this time that I didn't pick it up, and maybe it's because it's been that long time since I've watched Empire, is that they revoiced Boba Fett. Tamora Morrison, who played Jango Fett in the prequels and then also Boba Fett now, does that voiceover. And you know what? Good for him. He's lucked out. He's now going to be the voice in this film, which is everyone thinks is a classic.
Speaking of Boba Fett, I think there's a slide rule on his helmet. Like, it looks like literally like slide rule, which also reminds me of the guy carrying the ice cream maker when they evacuate.
Yes, that's right. I appreciated the Discord discussion of the evacuation of the ice cream maker. I was good. Like, that's an important. I bet it's a really good one. I want to give a shout out to, again, some of the smaller performances. The actor in particular, Kenneth Coley. He played Captain, then promoted to Admiral Piet. He's the one who actually figures out that they're on Hoth. He doesn't have a ton to do, but he has that one little head nod when, like, Vader force chokes Admiral Ozzel. Piet is promoted to Admiral. You see just before they cut out, like, Coley as Piet, like, head nods. Someone's like, "Hey, pick this guy up, will you?" Like, and it's priceless. It's just a great little moment. I love it. Yeah.
Lando doesn't recognize Leia. I guess it is a backwater, right?
Yeah.
Like,
right. Yeah.
But she's like the princess of the galaxy or whatever. Like, whatever.
Princess of Alderaan. Like, yeah.
Alderaan.
Yeah.
Seems like she might be a little bit known.
That's fair. Yeah.
But so I got that, and then Vader must have brought that torture rack with him to Bespin?
No, I always figured they jury rigged that one. I mean, like, there's a lot of industrial equipment there. I'm sure they could have just, like,
okay.
That was always my
like
thinking.
with the carbon freezing.
Yeah. All right, I hate to do this. There are so many continuity errors that the prequels and the later films introduced from watching this. Like, Yoda did not train Ben Kenobi. Like, but he says that in the beginning. So, like, that doesn't happen. And again, how does that whole exchange between Obi-Wan and Yoda of there is another, like, Obi-Wan knows that at this point. We know from the prequels that he knew that, but
I guess I kind of felt like that didn't bother me so much as it could be like, oh, you're right, they're like, because he's got all his hopes in Luke.
That's true.
Like, he's really wanting Luke to
be fair, you're right, and also he's dead at that point, so like maybe his like Force ghost doesn't forget stuff, but like the Yoda didn't train Ben part annoyed me.
Yeah. All right. This was as fun as we thought it would be. Oh, I'm going to have one last thing, which is we have another dongle problem that we had watching Rogue One.
Oh,
the Empire versus Rebel dongle. But it's solved by R2.
Yes.
Like, I don't know if you know, he uses, like, it's just funny. Like, I just noticed he uses like a different little attachment for all these different doors. Yeah. And I'm like, all these different things. And I'm just like, gosh, you not have like a universal USB? Like,
well, remember though, it also gets him in trouble. Like 3PO says, "Here, you open the door," and it turns out that he's having R2 plug himself into the power into the power source. Like, I felt bad for R2.
All right, so yeah, okay, we need to wrap up.
We do, yeah.
You can reach us on social media. I am at Anna Marie Cox. He is at Dan Dresner on Blue Sky. I am on Blue Sky as well as Instagram. Mm-hmm. My writing workshop is full up for the winter, but I'll be having it again in the spring. If you want to look on www.annamariecox.com. Spelled the same, pronounced differently. Mm-hmm. Dan, you have a Substack?
Yes, it's called Dresner's World. It's going to be there for a little bit. I don't know how much longer it's going to be. Let's just say I have a lot on my plate right now. But it's called Dresner's World. Talks about IR. So please check it out.
There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. So go ahead and subscribe. Like, what are you going to do? Yeah. Please become a patron if you can. And until next time,
keep this channel open for more.